Hello everyone. In this unit we're going to learn about the cell. And today we're learning about cell structure and function. So what does that mean? Well, a structure is like a building, right? So the structure of a cell is how the cell is built or put together. Then the function of a cell, or the function of the parts of the cell, tells what jobs they have, what they do in the cell. And so that's what we're going to study today. The cell is the basic unit of all living things, so it's very important. First of all, there are two major types of cells, eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotes are anything that has a nucleus. Hint, you do have a nucleus. And they also have membrane-bound organelles. In other words, organelles that are wrapped in a membrane. Eukaryotic cells include plant, animal, fungus, and protist cells. Prokaryotic cells only include bacteria. So if it's a bacteria, it's a prokaryote, and if it's anything else, it's a eukaryote. Now, prokaryote has no nucleus. The DNA in a prokaryote is just somewhere in the middle, not wrapped up in an actual nucleus. Plus, it does not have organelles. Well, no membrane-bound organelles. It does have ribosomes, because those are the things that make protein, but ribosomes are not wrapped up in a membrane, so that's why we say no membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotic cells are more complex. These are your higher forms of life. Prokaryotic cells are simpler. These are your basic forms of life, bacteria. In a eukaryotic cell, the DNA, as we've said, is in the nucleus. And in a prokaryotic cell, the DNA is just somewhere in the cytoplasm, the cell liquid. DNA is usually double-stranded. There are two strands that wrap around each other. And that's true in any eukaryotic cells. But in a bacteria, in a prokaryotic cell, the DNA is just one strand, which is kind of unusual. Finally, eukaryotic cells are much larger than prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are anywhere from 10 to 100 times bigger than bacteria. Next, use the Cell Structure PowerPoint by Carl Bradley to fill in the next part of these notes. Then use it to fill in the answers to these questions. By the way, plant cells are usually more square in shape. Animal cells are usually more round in shape. And even though bacteria come in many shapes, they are often drawn as a rod shape, although they often come as spheres or even spirals. Now switch to the Parts of a Cell PowerPoint. Remember, be sure to draw and sketch each cell part out to the side. So I want to show you the easiest way to draw those. When you sketch a cell wall, it's a thick wall around plant cells only. That's why I've drawn a square plant cell, but not a round animal cell. Animal cells don't have a cell wall. On the next page, we have the cell membrane, which is a wrapper around the cell. The cell membrane actually determines what gets in and out of each cell. Plant cells and animal cells have a cell membrane, and so do bacteria cells. So every cell in the world has a cell membrane. The cell wall is on the outside, and the cell membrane is on the inside for a plant cell. And for an animal cell, there's only a cell membrane and not a cell wall. The nucleus is sometimes called the brain of the cell. It doesn't think, but it has all the information needed, like all the books needed to tell how to make the cell. Those books are the DNA. So the nucleus is kind of like the library of the cell where all this information is kept. So the nucleus is not necessarily in the dead center of the cell. A cell nucleus is very different from the nucleus of an atom. They're two totally different things. So the nucleus of an atom does have to be in the center, but the nucleus of a cell is usually kind of off to the side a little bit. It's a small round circle, or maybe a medium-sized circle, and the nucleus holds the DNA and holds a nucleolus inside of it. Chromosomes are made of DNA. DNA holds all the genetic information for the cell. So DNA is a double twist, a double helix of two strands that has all the genetic information. When the DNA is uncoiled and looks kind of like spaghetti, that's DNA or chromatin. When it's all coiled up into little pairs of rods, those are chromosomes. Either way, the DNA is found in the nucleus. If we zoom out, there's the nucleus with the DNA or the chromosomes inside. Technically, I guess I drew DNA rather than chromosomes because it's not coiled up. It's all a big spaghetti mess. You can consider chromosomes and DNA pretty much interchangeable for right now. Inside the nucleus, there is a nucleolus. So let's take this nucleus and blow it up really big. And then inside the nucleus, there's a nucleolus, and you see the DNA unwound here as spaghetti looking stuff. Around the nucleus, there is a nuclear membrane, which is a membrane around the nucleus. The cell membrane is a membrane around the cell. Kind of makes sense. Next, cytoplasm is the liquid in which all the different organelles float. So you have a cell with all this background liquid known as cytoplasm. Sometimes it's called cytosol. Next is the endoplasmic reticulum. If you can't pronounce that, just call it the ER. You find the nucleus, and then there'll be this zigzaggy stuff around the nucleus. That is the endoplasmic reticulum. If it has dots on it, it's rough ER. Those dots are ribosomes. We'll get to those in a minute. And if there are no dots, then it's smooth ER, smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Now those ribosomes. Ribosomes are things that make proteins, and they are produced in that nucleolus inside the nucleus. So the ribosomes can be dots floating in the cytoplasm, or they can be dots drawn on the ER, on the rough ER. Either way, when you see little tiny dots, those are the ribosomes. Next, we have the mitochondria. When you're zoomed out and you're looking at the entire cell, the mitochondria look like beans with this squiggly thing inside of it. If you zoom in, there we go. There's the bean with the squiggly thing. What that is, you have an outer membrane wrapped around the mitochondria and an inner membrane that produces energy. That inner membrane is all folded up so that there's lots and lots of surface area for producing lots and lots of energy. Both plant and animal cells have mitochondria. Next are vacuoles. Plant cells have a really large central vacuole that is especially used for storing water. When a plant cell wilts, it's because its central vacuole doesn't have enough water to keep the plant upright. You'll notice the nucleus is much smaller than the central vacuole. Now, animal cells have much smaller vacuoles. Notice how they're even smaller than the nucleus. So a vacuole is like a vacuum hole. It stores stuff. In the plant cell, it holds water. In the animal cell, it holds food or digestive enzymes or water or other things. A plant cell will also have smaller vacuoles as well as that large central one. Lysosomes are a special type of vacuole that hold digestive enzymes. I didn't draw it again because it would look the same as a vacuole. The Golgi apparatus, or the Golgi bodies, are another cell part, And they look a lot like the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. They're both little zigzaggy looking organelles. So how do you tell the difference? Well, the endoplasmic reticulum is always right up against the nucleus. Golgi bodies are always drawn away from the nucleus, and they have little bubbles or little vesicles coming off of them. See, the Golgi is used to package up proteins. And so those little vesicles are a type of vacuole that package up those proteins and send them where they're supposed to go. Golgi bodies can be found in both plant and animal cells. And as we said, the vesicles are the little dots at the end of the Golgi bodies. Now, chloroplasts are only found in plant cells. So, here's a nucleus, and here are the chloroplasts. They look a lot like little bean-shaped structures. So how do you tell chloroplasts apart from mitochondria? Well, if you zoom in a little closer, the chloroplasts will look like they have little stacks of coins connected by lines. If they misdraw it, they might just draw lines. I guess they're trying to draw the coins from a side view instead of a top view, and then you can't really see the little coin shape, you just see the side, so it looks like a line. If you see a bean-shaped thing with a zigzaggy thing, that's a mitochondria, and mitochondria are mighty and produce the energy for the cell. Mitochondria are found in both plant and animal cells. But chloroplasts are only found in animal cells because those make food, and plants use the sun to make their own food. Animals have to eat food, they don't make their own food. Next, the cytoskeleton gives the cell its shape. The cytoskeleton is kind of like a skeleton, but kind of like a muscle. It's these little microtubules, these little hollow tubes that act like bones, but also act like muscles and help the cell move. These are found in both plant and animal cells. Next, we have centrioles, which are on your notes. Centrioles are two little things that look like two little cans. They always come in pairs, and they're always turned at 90 degrees to each other. They also may look like two little bundles of little rods. Centrioles are used when a cell divides. A cell divides by splitting itself in half to form two new cells. So it's also called cell replication. It's replicating itself and making two cells. Who knew you could divide and also multiply at the same time? So if we drew the cell around it, the cell would be much bigger than the centrioles inside it. So let's kind of look at everything together and how the parts of the cell work together. First, inside the nucleus, inside the nucleolus makes ribosomes, those little dots. And ribosomes make proteins. And the ribosomes travel through the nuclear membrane, out the nuclear pores, the holes in the nuclear membrane. And the ribosomes travel out to the regular cytoplasm of the cell where they can do their job of making proteins. Then DNA is inside the nucleus, and an RNA copy, which is like a temporary copy of the DNA, is made, and it goes outside the nucleus over to the ribosomes to be the instructions for making the proteins. Once the proteins are made, the endoplasmic reticulum helps transport the proteins and move them where they need to go. It's kind of like a highway. The proteins are sent to the Golgi apparatus, which packages them up into little vesicles. So it's kind of like a post office. It packages them up and then it ships them off to go either inside the cell where they're needed or to go outside the cell to the bloodstream and go elsewhere. The mitochondria, which are found in both plant and animal cells, make energy. The chloroplasts, which are found in plant cells only, use sunlight to make energy. Around the outside of the cell is the cell membrane that determines what gets into and out of the cell. It's the one that says, "You shall not pass." Can you hear Gandalf there? And The cell wall is only in a plant cell because it gives sturdiness and stiffness to the plant cells. See, plants don't have skeletons. Animals have, well, many animals have a skeleton to provide support, whereas a plant cell doesn't have any bones. Yes, they can have a cytoskeleton, but it's not exactly the same as real bones. So that cell wall provides extra sturdiness for plant cells. Then, if the plant has any wastes, for example, from using the food or making proteins or having leftover RNA that it can't use anymore, then the vacuoles, especially the lysosomes, will store the digestive enzymes, or it will store the waste products, or it will store the food or water or whatever. But when it has a waste product and then it has a lysosome with the digestive enzymes, those two vacuoles will come together and combine, and that will allow the digestive enzymes to digest the waste products, break them back down into parts, and then it can either be reused or thrown out of the cell as a waste product that it doesn't need anymore. All of the parts of the cell float around in the cytoplasm, the cell liquid, and the cytoskeleton or microtubules help some cells move and provide a little bit of support for others. Now, use the pictures to help you determine which structures belong to which type of cells. For example, you know that the cytoskeleton is found in both plant and animal cells because we drew it that way in the picture. Then go back to the end of the cell structure PowerPoint by Carl Bradley and answer the questions at the end. Your notes look a little bit different because they have hints.